Yes, good morning. It is that time of the week again. Yes, time to do another fragrance video. And currently, I'm still on holiday. Of course, when this video is uploaded, it will be long gone. But it's been a few days since I filmed a video, and I want to do one again. And today, I'm talking about a fragrance that I haven't worn for a little while. I've got it in my collection, and I wanted to do another for and against this fragrance. And the question I'm kind of asking today is Bentley for Men Intense, a fragrance a lot of people will of course know very well in the fragrance community. Is it still relevant? Look, it's a fragrance that's certainly not new anymore. It used to be an infant, now it's a grown-up teenager, and of course as time moves on, our interests move on, and maybe it's time to move on from this fragrance as well. But that's what we're going to look at today. I'm going to build a case for and against this iconic scent, and yeah, we'll determine by the end, in my opinion, is it still worth buying. So we're going to go straight into it. We'll do 1 point for, 1 point against, and we'll keep working through. We'll do 5 of each overall. So yeah, let's get on with it. Okay, so let's start with the first point for Bentley for Men Intense, why I think it is still relevant. And probably this is more relevant now than in any time before, and that is the price. Look, many fragrances now, whether they're designer scents or, you know, niche scents from years ago, from the sort of time Bentley for Men Intense was released, let's be honest, a lot of the prices have gone up. That's just the cost of living, you know, most things have gone up. Your grocery shopping's gone up. Your cost of running trainers, I've noticed, has gone up massively, and I'm forking out fortunes every year getting more trainers. But Bentley for Men Intense is still relatively inexpensive. You can get this for between £20 to £30 pretty much all the time, whether that's on eBay, whether that's on discount websites, and I think that's brilliant. Look, is it nice to treat yourself every so often and go and get like an £80, £90 fragrance? Yeah, of course it is. But when you've had a scent that you absolutely love and you've only paid, say, £20 for it in the past, and now it's discontinued and it's £60, £70, I find it very difficult to try and get that scent again. I think, oh, I'll try something else, because there's so many different smells out there. Thankfully, if you absolutely love this fragrance, it hasn't really changed over the years. It's still readily available. It's still around that £20 to £30 range. And if you love it that much, 100ml bottles very welcome as well. I hate it when you can't get big bottle sizes in this fragrance. So for that reason, I've got to say that's a huge plus. It's inexpensive. If you've never tried it and you want to try it, it's not too bad. You're not going to feel too ripped off if you're only forking out £25 or so as an average price. So for that reason, I think it's still relevant. So what I tend to do when I look at the pros and cons of fragrances, I tend to use the same pro as a bit of a stick to beat it with when we talk about the cons. And we've obviously just briefly touched upon the fact, if you love this fragrance, it's brilliant to have a 100ml bottle. But let's say you do, you go, oh, do you know what? I've heard Harry say, look, it's £25, that's a bargain. I'm going to get it. And then you go, oh, actually this smell isn't for me. 100ml does feel like a very big bottle size, let's be honest. And probably what you'll do is you'll do one of three things. One, you'll either leave it sitting in your cupboard for a few months, and probably a few years, because you'll never want to use it at all. You might start using it as a room spray or something else where you just want to make your clothes not smell like BO or sweat. You might put it on eBay, or you might just give it to a family member. And I think the other thing as well is, say you do like this scent, sometimes if you're a fragrance collector, if you've got 3, 4, maybe 5 fragrances in your collection that you really like, you might have this fragrance sitting in there for a year or two and you never really finish it. So sometimes it is nice to have a bit more flexibility in bottle sizes, and unfortunately with all Bentley fragrances, they all come in 100ml and 100ml only. So if you only want to try something like this, or you have loads of fragrances in your collection, it can just sit and grow around for a while. And I do think that's a negative. Look, I'm someone who likes big bottle sizes. I like overspraying things as well. So that's not a problem for me. But I think for many people, that is a lot. That is a lot in your collection, and you may even lose your love for it by the end of the bottle. Sometimes I've enjoyed a fragrance at the start, but it's become too heavy, too cloying, and almost too familiar. And in that sense, I think, oh, I won't get it again. So Bentley, I think a bit of versatility, maybe a 30ml bottle, a 50ml bottle, and a 100ml bottle may even help this fragrance last the test of time even more than it already has. Okay, so on to the next positive. And for me, this is the biggest positive of them all. Look, I said about price being absolutely fantastic. But the reason I think it's such a good price is mainly because of its scent quality, yes. Now, I'm a massive lover of boozy fragrances. Rum, that is the prominent note in this, is absolutely gorgeous. And you've got these nice sweet resinous woods as well, which kind of gives it this bit of sparkle, which I absolutely love. Now, of course, boozy notes tend to be in very high-end fragrances, and when I've had cheap boozy scents in general, they've not often been that good. I've mentioned this one before, but I love Nasomato Peronda, which is an amazing whiskey caramel type fragrance. I've had a clone of that, and the boozy note just doesn't compare. So normally when you're looking at boozy fragrances, you're paying a lot more money, particularly if it's the prominent thing. This one easily stacks up against fragrances of boozy notes that are worth £200, £300. And that's why I think it is so popular. It's a high quality. I would have no qualms about dressing this one up with a suit and tie as much as some Tom Ford fragrances, Creed fragrances. And that just says how high the quality is. And for me, that is the biggest selling point of this fragrance, is why it's done so well. It smells quality. It hasn't got an alcoholic blast or anything like that. It smells like a high-end fragrance, and it's got to be a huge pro of why it has lasted the test of time and why I still think it is relevant. Now, as we've said, this fragrance is getting older. I'm certainly getting older. Everyone's getting older, and of course the scent notes in this fragrance may not be for everyone. Again, that's personal preference. But if you look at the trends of modern perfumery, you can see the notes maybe in Bentley for Men Intense aren't what people want so much anymore. Again, this is still a very sweet fragrance, but it is all about the booze. And if you look at some of the most popular notes now in perfumery, it tends to be vanilla and that sort of gourmand type fragrances that smell more like food, desserts than anything else. This isn't that. And I think when we're talking about the next con here, that's what it is. Modern perfumery trends don't necessarily match the scent profile of Bentley for Men Intense, and that does have potential issues down the line. Look, we've seen certain old school retro fragrances. Look, Aramis is still around, but modern fragrances aren't going to smell like Aramis. They're not going to use that iconic leather note as much anymore because people don't want it. And as much as I'm someone who loves that boozy note, and I obviously grew up a bit with this fragrance, a lot of people don't. And I do feel, as this younger audience of people come into the sort of fragrance world, let's say, this fragrance might potentially suffer as a result. So as much as I say the scent quality of this is high, the next con I'm going to say is maybe the notes in this fragrance are just going to phase out over time, and this fragrance will as a result, because people don't want to smell like they've been on a drinking session. Personally, I don't think it has that, but I know a lot of people do think if anything has that boozy note in, it may just be misinterpreted, and I think that's the reason why it may not be relevant, and it's a potential con with this fragrance in the future. On to the third pro, and I don't think I've ever seen a clone of this one. So all I'm going to say is that as a pro, is it's not a victim of the clone market. Now, there are many iconic scents out there, as iconic as Bentley for Men Intense, more iconic than Bentley for Men Intense, that have been heavily cloned. You know, if you look at Tom Ford Tobacco Vinny, it is everywhere. Creed Aventus in particular, probably the most cloned fragrance I can think of. It is everywhere, because you're going to be forking out £200 to £300 normally to get the original. Now, of course, where this one is quite affordable, and it is kind of the price you pay for a clone, around £25, I think a lot of brands that do clone fragrances just stay away from this one. But look, I say that, and Davidoff Coolwater, which of course is a cheap fragrance in its own right, I managed to find a clone of that, but you don't get the same volume, because the whole message or the whole point of clone fragrances is to smell like an expensive fragrance for a fraction of the price. And let's be honest, you can't better what the original is, because if you like the original, that's the whole reason, you know, you get a clone, because you just want to make it more affordable. But let's be honest, it can't beat what you absolutely love in the first place. And I think that's where Bentley for Men is going to stay relevant. It's because Bentley for Men Intense is something that is affordable, easily, easily available. If it was discontinued, maybe clones would work a bit more with this, but I think it's going to be very hard for a clone brand to even match this price, first of all, but also make that boozy note smell as good as this one does. So for that reason, I think the fact it's not a victim of the clone market is a huge plus, and I think it's why it's going to stay relevant for the next 10-20 years. Now, of course, we must stress while I'm at the halfway point that all these pros and cons are very much subjective, and probably the next con that I'm going to bring is arguably the most subjective of them all. And I don't like this one about it, and I'm going to be honest, I'm not the only one that's felt this before with these fragrances from Bentley. It's the bottles. Now, I've always said Bentley for Men Intense, Bentley Absolute, Bentley Silver Lake, they're all in the same bottle shape. They look like a bodybuilder. And I say this for one reason. If you've ever seen them with the lid on, they look really nice. You take the cap off it and then you spray the atomizer. It looks like a little head on massive broad shoulders. And that's why I always compare it to a bodybuilder. Now, there's a few negatives that I say with this. Again, because of the big bottle size, it's not the easiest to pack. So say you want to take it on holiday with you, where I am at the minute. I didn't bring it for that main reason, is it's not the easiest to fit in a bag. It's a very funny shape. It's kind of quite sharp on the edges. It kind of bloats itself out in the middle. So it's kind of like round but square at the same time, and it's awkward, it's heavy, it's clunky. And I must admit, with one of my old Bentley for Men Intense bottles, had issues with leaking. Now, it's not the end of the world because there's kind of like a little groove where the cap sits in, but the main thing really for me is just the fact the head kind of, or the atomizer lid, which I'm saying is like the head of a bodybuilder, it almost goes missing on its body. So yeah, it's not the best for travelling, essentially, this one. And I do think that's, I'm not saying it's particularly something that other brands have really thought about. I do think a lot of fragrance bottles are too big and too clunky, but I think it's something that we're going to see more in the future. People are going to want, better shaped bottles, more, slimmer bottles that are square, that you can slip in a pocket so they can use it on the go. Because let's be honest, we all live very busy, active lives, and sometimes we don't just have time to go home and spray something on our shelf. We have to take it with us, and I think that's where Bentley maybe just to adapt this bottle in the future. Otherwise, some people may go, do you know what, the size of it and also the shape of it, I'll get something else for the same price range. Okay, so on to the 4 Pro, and I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think many people really know this fragrance, and I think that does lend itself into being quite a good thing for many people, particularly myself, who likes my fragrances. So I'm actually going to say the next Pro is, despite its popularity in the fragrance community, it's still not that well known, and it does give you a bit of uniqueness compared to everyone else. And now I can give you a story about this. I used to work in a primary school, and the school caretaker, I remember I was sitting on my lunch break with him, and he said, "Oh, that's really nice, what is that?" And I said, "Oh, it's Bentley for Men Intense." And he's someone who absolutely loves his cars. He has a Mercedes, so he really liked the fact this was like a car brand fragrance. And it's one of those things that it's not a well-known scent, and people go, "Oh, I didn't know Bentley did fragrances." And you'd be amazed how many people say that. Some of you may be looking at me like, "Oh, come on, Harry, everyone knows this fragrance." But if you're not someone who's into fragrances, not watching videos on YouTube, for example, and you just go into like your local shop to buy the bargain bucket scent, people don't realise that. And they don't realise that Bentley does fragrances. And when they smell this one, they actually go, "Wow, that's really nice." But I do like the fact, even though it's, it's unique in the fact not many people know it, they know the brand and they know they're classy cars. And I think that's a huge benefit. It's not like this brand is fading out. I look at some brands like Mugler or Zara in particular, and even now Versace, which has been bought by Prada, those brands seem to be fizzling away a little bit. Because Bentley's more known for its cars than its fragrances, it's always going to be relevant. It's still relevant now today. And even whether it's, related to cars or fragrances, it will always have that brand recognition, but also unique because people don't know this scent. And I think that's a huge plus, and why I think it's still going to stay relevant. Okay, so on to the 4th reason why I think Bentley for Men Intense will lose its relevancy. And I think it's because it's such an alpha male scent. Now again, we did sort of briefly touch upon this earlier with the notes in this fragrance, but I think when you look at Bentley as a brand, I always think, and I'm being super stereotypical here, but when I think of someone driving a Bentley, I think of it more as a male, a sort of James Bond type figure, like Aston Martins. And look, the main thing I'm trying to say here is this is a masculine fragrance, and Bentley fragrances all tend to lean more masculine. They're more of a masculine brand. And I think people are moving away from that. Look, do I really like this thing? Do I think it has mass appeal? Yes. I've had many compliments from people, whether they're just, someone who's walking by who doesn't really have any interest in fragrances, to those people who really like their scents, like my brother who collects them. He absolutely loves this fragrance, had it many times. But there is a shift now. There's a shift to have more unisex fragrances. And I think partly that's the price, because, a lot of people don't want to be spending 80, 90 pounds on a really masculine macho man type scent. But also a younger person doesn't want to smell a little bit smoky, a little bit like an old man who's been sitting in a pub in a brewery drinking all night. And that's the thing. This one isn't unisex at all. And if you're looking at like the competition out there these days, a Dior Sauvage, yes, it's a masculine fragrance, but you can wear it in many, many situations. This one doesn't have that versatility. This is the sort of fragrance where, if I'm being honest with you, you're going to wear it on nights out, cold weather days, climate controlled environments. You're not really going to, I've never thought when I've been out for a run, of course I've worn them on workouts to do reviews, but if I wasn't doing a review, it's not the one I'm going to reach for. Even if I prefer it to a fresh fragrance, it's just not what you want. So you're going to have to buy another fragrance. Whereas I think there's now a shift towards a more musky scent, obviously blue shower gel type fragrances, because you can wear them in many situations. They're not divisive. And again, if you're paying £60-70, you can just have that one scent that does it all. Bentley's going to need a bit of a sidekick, someone to complement, those hot summer days where Bentley's going to work on the cool winter nights. So yeah, for that reason, it may lose its relevancy. Just the competition out there is becoming more versatile and more unisex. Hey, so on to the 5th Pro. And I was going to really just be boring here and say, nostalgia and scent memories is a huge plus of having Bentley for Men Intense. But I'll be honest with you, I say that all the time. And any fragrance, if you've worn it on a special occasion, whether it's a £5 scent or a £55 or £500 fragrance, any fragrance can bring scent memories. Of course they can, because it will take you back to those things. I've always said, if you smell something and you wore it on a wedding or whatever, it's amazing how much it strengthens that memory. So I didn't want to do that one today. And the 5th one I'm going to say, and I think this is a real positive for Bentley, because they're not mainly a fragrance brand, they haven't saturated the market with fragrances. Now what do I mean by that? Look, I'm a massive fan, and you would have seen from a lot of my fragrance reviews, huge fan of Lush body sprays. But I'll be honest, in the last, say, 20 of them I've had, I'm starting to find that there's more misses than hits. Lush pride themselves on gourmand scents, and they've done some amazing ones, and they still are doing amazing ones, don't get me wrong. But you do find, if you keep releasing fragrances, and they release about 7, 8, 9 a year, they put them on limited edition and they go, so they can release 4 or 5 more. You find that you just have, everything kind of smells the same, and even if they smell slightly different, you can only wear gourmand scents on certain occasions. You're not going to wear them on a hot summer's day. And you start to think, I can wear that one or this one, but I can't wear them both on different occasions. And you end up just having bottles sit there. That's what I like with Bentley for Men Intense, that you can have this one and just, use it for all those occasions. They're not bringing out another Bentley for Men Absolute Intense or something else, and many, many flankers that you go, yeah, it smells a little bit different, but it's not worth spending £50-60 just to get something which I'll use in the same situation. So I like the fact, because they're maybe not so much a fragrance brand, they just stick to the ones they like, the ones that have been popular and they know they're good at. They haven't just jumped on the bandwagon and go, right, let's up the price, let's bring out multiple flankers. No, they're not a fragrance brand ultimately. I think that works in its favour. You're not having as many options to pick from, and just sticking with this old but gold one, I think that's a huge plus. So they haven't saturated the market, and that's why I think it's still going to stay relevant while other brands are releasing 30 or 40 fragrances a year. Ridiculous. And my 5th con and my final point I want to make of why Bentley for Men Intense may not stay relevant, and it kind of links to the last pro I made, but it's ever so slightly different. I touched upon it earlier obviously in recent months, I think it was at the start of 2026, Prada announced they bought Versace out. Now, if you said to me like 5-10 years ago that was going to be the case, I wouldn't have believed you at all. And what you tend to find is if you look a little bit more closely, you recognise the name of a brand, but then below that, that brand tends to be owned by a certain company. Now, Bentley is currently owned, I believe, by Lalique, and obviously Lalique do their own fragrance lines as well. And I do think when you've got an iconic scent like Bentley for Men Intense, that's going to be a target for, you know, it's going to be competition. It's going to be something that investors look at and think, do you know what? I want that fragrance, I want that scent under our umbrella. And I do think Bentley being a car brand, and obviously I know it's Lalique now that sort of makes the scent, there is a bit of a threat of it potentially being bought out. And look, do I think in the case of Versace, do I think Prada are going to go, let's get rid of blue jeans, let's get rid of the Dreamer, let's get rid of some of the iconic Versace scent? No, I don't think they are going to. But over time, you may find that they phase out. And I really hope that that's not the case with Bentley for Men Intense. Again, as we were saying earlier, it's not necessarily what many brands are making today around that £25-30 range. They're making more Brox and ISOE super heavy type sets of blue shower gel fragrances. And you just wonder if they do, this fragrance does move under a different umbrella. Are they going to change it? Are they going to start releasing flankers? Are they going to make this one more expensive? You know, and that's going to affect its longevity in the future. So I think while it's still under the Lalique umbrella, that would be amazing. And I hope that's kind of the case. I hope that continues. And as I was saying in recent times, I did it one of my fleet's drive-alongs. There's Jimmy Choo, and I believe, there's a few other brands that are part of that line. And honestly, they're doing so well. The sales are up. So the fragrance industry isn't struggling with the cost of living so much. And obviously with this sort of fragrance, keep it affordable, as we said earlier, regardless of whether it changes hands, changes ownership. And I think it'll still do well. But you do worry when someone else gets their hands on it, are they going to change it? Are they going to ruin it? And let's be honest, subconsciously, some people at times go, this fragrance has changed through reformulations. It doesn't smell as good anymore. It doesn't smell as strong anymore. And subconsciously, if you do sometimes see a different brand selling it, you may have that preconceived idea, even if it's not completely true. So, yes, I think competition and investment from other brands could affect it, maybe in a positive way, who knows. But I think ultimately, when it's so good at the moment, we want to see, we hope it stays in the hands of the league that is still producing this scent. There we are, that is it for today. 5 pros, 5 cons. And ultimately, the main question we're asking really today regarding Bentley for Men Intense is it still relevant today? And I know from my opinion, the answer is a resounding yes. Look, as I touched upon earlier, I've grown up with this fragrance. I remember having it when I was kind of late teens, early 20s, and now I'm sort of approaching my 30s. I'm still wearing it. I remember my dad wearing it, my brothers had it, had confidence with it, taking it on holidays, networking events, all these sorts of things that gives you a good scent memory. So from my point of view, I've got a bit of bias here. It's always going to bring me that bit of nostalgia. And of course, as someone who loves boozy scents, it's one of the best. It's certainly the best value for money boozy scent, in my opinion. It is amazing. I think the question is it's not so much about me. And I'm going to ask this to anyone who's watching this who's maybe a little bit younger than myself. If you haven't owned this fragrance before, are you going to maybe like it as much as the modern things? Because obviously people are growing up now with their first scents being sweeter, fresher type fragrances. And I think that's going to work against Bentley for Men Intense for those who maybe have never had it before. So I think it's still relevant today, 10, 15 years time. Who knows, it may be a different question. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've got also any other pros and cons of this. But yeah, thanks for watching. Catch you later.